This is the CBS Evening News. Dan Rather reporting. Good evening. After 3 months of trying to force Panama's military strongman into exile, President Reagan today backed down. A White House spokesman acknowledged that negotiations now are underway with Manuel Noriega, and the U.S. is no longer demanding that he leave Panama. Noriega also won a round in court. A federal judge in Miami ruled that he can challenge the drug-dealing indictment against him without surrendering to U.S. authorities. More about all this from Terrence Smith at the White House.
President Reagan has insisted for weeks that General Noriega must leave Panama. But today, having failed to accomplish that goal, the White House suggested it might settle for less. Spokesman Marlin Fitzwater signaled the switch in strategy, telling reporters, "Our policy is that General Noriega must go, which means leave power." Asked if a deal allowing Noriega to step down but remain in Panama would be acceptable in Washington, Fitzwater said, "We are willing to talk with him and see what his ideas and what his plans are." A top State Department official is in Panama meeting Noriega for the second time in 2 weeks and apparently discussing those options. At the White House today, the president sounded ambivalent.
Can Noriega stay in Panama if he leaves power?
I hope not.
That was in sharp contrast to what the president and his chief aides have been saying since the crisis began 2 months ago.
I'm just going to say what I believe. He should leave Panama.
The way to end this crisis is to get him out of the country.
I believe everyone who has looked at this believes that leaving the country is the most obvious solution.
The softening of that hard line upset one critic who has even suggested using military force to remove Noriega.
As a result of our failure to act swiftly and surely and to bring about his removal, we now have played into his hands.
Another member of Congress says the administration's actions so far have victimized Panama.
We miscalculated that the economic sanctions would work. They have not. They've hurt the country as much as they've hurt Noriega.
White House officials stressed that they would still like to see Noriega leave Panama and the hemisphere. Their new willingness to compromise on that point is a concession of the obvious, that everything they've tried so far has failed. Terrence Smith, CBS News, the White House.
In the past, Noriega's troops have broken up big protest rallies, so today his opponents tried a new tactic. They staged more than a dozen small protests around Panama City. Troops rushed to the various sites and fired on the demonstrators with tear gas and live ammunition. No word yet on casualties. These were the first street demonstrations against Noriega in more than a month. A report out today by a drug panel from the U.S., Latin America, and Canada says efforts to stop drug trafficking have failed. The report says the focus should be on drug users, getting people off drugs or, better, never started on them. The panel said drug traffic will go up as long as people want drugs because there's so much profit in it for the smugglers. Those profits are so high, drug runners will do almost anything for a successful smuggle. Anything. Some die trying or kill others. As part of our CBS News investigation of what is and isn't actually being done about the drug traffic plague, CBS News correspondent Richard Schlesinger looks tonight at what the narcotics cops are up against, stopping the smugglers.
Launch the citation. This is the scramble. Launch the citation.
This is a fairly typical day along the southeastern U.S. drug corridor where smugglers are stretching the limits of imagination and danger.
Launch the citation. This is the scramble.
Teams of pilots are being launched to find a plane that has been spotted flying a route favored by drug traffickers. In the air, customs pilots play a high-altitude, high-speed, high-tech game of hide-and-seek, flying so close to their quarry they can read the tail number.
Registered subject identified as November 9039.
The 3 people on board this plane were arrested. Customs pilots believe marijuana was pushed out of the plane while it was in flight. It's a daring but common form of smuggling, often documented by infrared cameras mounted on customs airplanes.
2 bags. Dropped another bag. Number 5 is got it.
Okay, airdrop. We got a drop.
Copy, airdrop underway.
Drug pilots take enormous risks to deliver their cargo. Planes stuffed with narcotics have landed on highways at night.
He just landed on a road. There's a vehicle on the road possibly assisting him.
This plane tried to land on a makeshift airstrip surrounded by trees. At night, it didn't work.
just crashed. Did he crash? He's crashed. There's a firewall.
More than anything, the war against drugs is a battle of wits. Just as soon as law enforcement agencies think up new tactics, drug smugglers find a way around them.
Yeah, I see it from here. Oh, bingo!
In Fort Lauderdale recently, customs inspectors found more than a ton of cocaine hidden inside frozen fruit juice. This was a pretty imaginative scheme, but not the most imaginative.
We had, in Port Everglades back in November, we had the 8,900-pound coke seizure.
That time, smugglers hid more than 4 tons of cocaine inside hollowed-out boards. Cocaine has been stuffed inside electronic equipment, mixed in with sesame seeds, hidden inside fake yams, even parachuted in. This time, the smuggler died when his chute failed to open.
Yeah, last time I was surprised was when I took a guy's wooden leg off, and the guy had 1.5 pounds of coke inside his wooden leg. That surprised me.
Now, John Ryan specializes in spotting people called swallowers. They smuggle cocaine by eating it.
We suspect that he's eating cocaine.
Scores of people have been arrested after swallowing as many as 200 pellets of cocaine wrapped in latex. Once nature takes its course, their job is done.
To think that somebody could eat 2 pounds of coke, it's really incredible.
Even though they look for drugs in every conceivable place, law enforcement officers admit about 90% of the drugs get past them.
I don't fool myself. I don't think I'm stopping the drug trade, but we try. We do the best we can under the circumstances.
Certainly we could increase the amount of seizures, we could increase the amount of arrests coming in, but we would have to turn the airports and the seaports into police states.
There's another one here!
While the government spends hundreds of millions of dollars to stop them, the smugglers stand to make billions of dollars. So they continue to risk running the federal gauntlet, and most of the time, they win.
Hey, I got one with nothing in it. I win. 4 for 4. I'm on a roll.
Richard Schlesinger, CBS News, Fort Lauderdale.
There will be more of this kind of reporting on tonight's 48 Hours. Tonight's 48 Hours focuses, among other things, on the starting point of the drug pipelines leading to the communities and kids of America, the cocaine crop fields of Bolivia. We'll take you there, up close, inside and frontline, during 48 Hours in the Cocaine War, tonight at 7 Central Time. A wave of strikes is spreading across Poland, led by supporters of the outlawed Solidarity Labor Union. The main struggle began 3 days ago in Poland's largest factory, a walkout against government economic reforms and price increases. But as correspondent Bert Quint reports, it's a challenge not just to the communist government of Poland, but to the Soviet Union as well.
Workers inside the Lenin steel mill are standing firm tonight in the most serious outbreak of labor unrest in Poland since martial law broke the back of Solidarity 6 years ago. The Polish regime warned the strikers they're breaking the law. Unless they go back to work, riot police could be called in. What's really at issue here is Mikhail Gorbachev's perestroika, the plan to restructure socialism throughout the East Bloc. These people say no to the hardships of reform. They demand a 50% pay raise to offset price hikes brought by the removal of state subsidies that kept the price of goods low. Poland is where perestroika is happening first, and so far all it's brought is more misery.
I think that we have to expect a lot of new conflicts, a lot of, trouble in the visible future, because you have to pay a price for such deep changes.
Those changes are to inject elements of capitalism with its profits and perils into the safe but sorry system that has kept Poland in poverty for 4 decades. Many Poles who were apathetic before, exhausted by the struggles against the old system, are finding they can't cope with this first stage of the new one. They've become desperate, surviving by selling anything from family treasures to scarce items they've been lucky enough to find in a shop. Simple pleasures have become luxuries, like the traditional gift of flowers, or a visit to the hairdresser that now costs a couple of days' pay. What were luxuries are becoming mere dreams. A tiny Polish-made car costs 3.5 years' salary on the open market. Jerzy Kosinski, the Polish-American novelist who left here 30 years ago, says he's shocked.
So you have the freest people right now in Eastern Europe, and this is what is so baffling here, that they are starving.
More big price hikes on coal for a starter are coming. With them, more frustration and anger.
Polish leaders fear there will be bloodshed as Poles face the harsh economic realities Gorbachev hasn't yet dared impose next door in his own country.
On this side of the border, the first results already are in. And from here, it looks like there's a long and painful road ahead. Bert Quint, CBS News, Tiraspol, Poland.
The Gorbachev campaign to reform the Soviet Union is setting off all kinds of protest movements inside the communist bloc. CBS News chief European correspondent Tom Pendleton has a report from East Germany.
It's extraordinary to hear "We Shall Overcome" sung in English in East Germany. 7,000 persons gathered in this Dresden church to call for human rights. Such meetings are taking place all over the country, most of them in Protestant churches that once were empty, but are now places where young people voice their dissent. A grassroots civil rights movement is growing in one of the most repressive and rigidly controlled societies behind the Iron Curtain. Communist Party chief Erich Honecker leads Eastern Europe's most economically productive regime. But at age 75, he's losing the hearts and minds of the nation's youth. Demonstrators recently disrupted a major Communist Party parade. They carried banners proclaiming the right to dissent. East Germans know the West better than any other people in the communist bloc. Television programs from the Western side are seen here by almost everyone.
It's not just ideas from the West that are creating pressure for change. Surprisingly, it's now the winds from the East, from Gorbachev's Soviet Union, that are doing the most to stir up dissent.
The dissidents adopted the tactic of tailing along behind official demonstrations with their own slogans. Police didn't know how to react to banners proclaiming "Go Gorby." And when they raided a clandestine library in a church basement, they found underground pamphlets welcoming Gorbachev's reforms and a poster listing the German-language broadcasts of Radio Moscow. Honecker had been trying to present a more liberal face to the West, but recently his patience snapped. Arrests followed. When the arrests fueled further protests and touched off church vigils throughout the country, the regime then began expelling dissidents to the West. Like civil rights activist Ralph Hirsch, many of those deported are communists who want to reform the system, not overthrow it.
So you want to go back?
Of course I'd love to go back. That's my home. That's my friends. That's where I'm needed.
The nucleus of active dissidents is still small, perhaps only several thousand, but there's a growing army of young sympathizers. The truth shall make us free. It's a powerful message that the aging leadership of East Germany doesn't seem to understand and doesn't know how to deal with. Tom Fenton, CBS News, East Germany.
For the first time in 4 years, the U.S. House of Representatives today refused to approve a ban on testing of U.S. anti-satellite weapons. It's the first arms control policy loss for the Democrats during votes on the new defense spending bill. It surprised the Air Force, too. After losing 3 years in a row, the Air Force didn't even ask for money for testing anti-satellite weapons next year. Still to come on tonight's CBS Evening News. Correspondent John Blackstone on a marsh full of fouled by fuel. And David Browning on the reason Uncle Milty is having trouble sleeping. The judge presiding over the case of Oliver North, John Poindexter and Company today said it's possible the missiles for Iran, criminal, corruption, and conspiracy charges may never get to a jury. Law correspondent Rita Braver reports why.
The men under indictment in the Iran-Contra affair battled the prosecution today over a key issue in the case, access to classified evidence. Independent counsel Lawrence Walsh disclosed that secret material found in former National Security Council aide Oliver North's office would be of great value to certain intelligence groups and could expose people in very difficult situations, even to torture and death. Walsh said there were documents in Colonel North's office that even he shouldn't have had, information that for security reasons should have been scattered among several documents. And Walsh commented, "What he had them for, I don't know." Walsh asked Judge Gerhard Gesell to deny that information to arms middleman Albert Hakim, who sells security systems in the Middle East. Walsh adding he's put in jeopardy traveling there with such sensitive information. And there are expected to be several more months of courtroom wrangling over top-secret data before the trial even begins. Walsh has reportedly collected over 1 million classified documents. The government has been forced to construct a special vault known as the SCIF, or Sensitive Compartmented Information Facility, where the defense attorneys will have to go to see the secret information. And Judge Gesell raised the possibility that if there's any document so delicate that the government refuses to disclose it, the case will never be tried. And the charges against Oliver North, John Poindexter, Richard Secord, and Albert Hakim will be dismissed. Rita Braver, CBS News, at the federal courthouse in Washington.
Lady Bird Johnson was honored in Washington today. The widow of President Lyndon Johnson appeared at ceremonies in Congress and at the White House. The former First Lady was being recognized for her years of work to improve the environment, promoting research on wildflowers and using them to beautify the American landscape. Shell Oil Company officials today blamed a drain pipe rupture and violation of company policy for a deadly oil spill in the San Francisco Bay. Shell pledged to pay for a $1 million cleanup, but not all the money in the world will bring back the more than 100 migratory birds and small animals already killed by this spill. John Blackstone reports.
By sheer volume, it is a small oil spill, 175,000 gallons, but where it's spilled is making some officials describe this as an ecological disaster. These marshes alongside San Francisco Bay are one of the few remaining nesting grounds in California for waterfowl and shorebirds.
I mean, basically, the whole West is a desert, so when you find wetlands in it, they're critical and different habitat.
Almost 400 birds have already been pulled from the sticky crude oil by volunteers who clean and care for them.
Avocets, reddy ducks, mallards, teals, blue-winged teals.
Many more birds might have been caught in the spill had it happened 1 month earlier at the height of the migratory season. Coming now, the spill caught birds that nest in the marsh and their young.
The oil just floated up over nesting birds' nests, so all of those babies are lost and all the eggs are lost.
Wildlife biologists trying to save some victims of the spill say uncounted thousands of birds, some of them on the endangered species list, use the marshes as an important stop on the Pacific migratory route. San Francisco Bay has already lost more than 90% of its marshland to development. Until 20 years ago, the marshes were considered useless, filled in and built over. Now, biologists recognize their ecological importance. Well, rescuers are trying to save all the residents of the marsh. The long-term concern is for the marsh itself. It is an oasis of nature surrounded by refineries. But if it disappears, so may future generations of everything that lives here. John Blackstone, CBS News, Martinez, California.
At the San Diego Wild Animal Park today, the first California condor chick ever conceived in captivity chipped a small hole in the end of its shell. Officials played recordings of vulture grunts and hisses to cheer the chick in its struggle to progress from being a kind of condor minimum and become a big bird. A spokeswoman said everything is proceeding fine, with the chick expected to emerge from the shell tomorrow or Saturday. All 27 known California condors are in captivity. Big developments these days on the Beverly Hills real estate scene, and when we say big, remember, this is where supercolossal means mildly interesting. David Browning looks at the latest in Beyond Your Wildest Dreams houses.
As California mansions go, it's not a bad place. The neighbors are Gregory Peck, Rod Stewart, and Barbara Streisand. But the owner finds the house too small. The living room, master bedroom, bathrooms, even the walk-in closet, much too small.
You want something at least twice as large, in other words.
Yeah, twice this size just for his, and then twice this size just for her.
And so, this 10,000 square foot house will be torn down and replaced with a new one twice as big.
The land values were just so expensive, it was easier to tear down and start from scratch than to remodel.
You heard the man right. From Beverly Hills to Bel Air, land is so scarce and remodeling so expensive, They're tearing down grand old houses and building even bigger ones.
It's hard to explain. I don't know. The air of Beverly Hills is just making probably the people crazy.
Esther Tepper and her husband are finishing their new house. A marble bathroom for her, a 1,500-bottle wine cellar for him. In the land of the beautiful people, the sounds of the buzzsaws and hammers are heard, and some, like Milton Berle, can't sleep.
Bang, 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 bang. They have made so much noise.
The rooms are so large that they require 2 smoke detectors in the bedrooms.
Keeping up with the Joneses or the Pecks or the Stewarts is a tall order here. Architect Jim Wright calls it Beverly Hills Impressionism.
The grand waste of space in an entry hall. The whole thing is just to impress people.
So far, the flat-out winners in the Big House sweepstakes are television producer Aaron Spelling and his wife Candy, who are building this mansion, which some passers-by mistake for a hotel. At 56,000 square feet, it sets a local record for sheer size, leading some city planners to wonder when a house stops being a home.
It was always assumed that a single-family home was either going to be 1 or 2 stories high, not 3.5 stories high, not 50,000 square feet, but a single-family home, like Leave It to Beaver. Not anymore.
Meanwhile, back down the street, Uncle Milty has calmed down about the noise, and Esther Tepper wants to have him over when her house is done.
And you are already invited to the party, the opening.
I am?
And we hope on 4th of July.
Don't mention hope.
We will. We
when
hope
you're
it will
speaking
be done.
As for prices, don't mention that either. A single lot around here will cost you $2 million. The house, of course, is extra. David Browning, CBS News, Beverly Hills.
And that's the CBS Evening News. Until 48 hours in the cocaine war, tonight at 8, 7 Central Time, Dan Rather. See you again soon.
From the front lines as America fights a deadly invader.
You're under arrest, U.S. Drug Enforcement.
48 hours tonight.